Great. To everybody that's joined us this afternoon, thank you so much. We appreciate the fact. I trust you got a cup of coffee or a cool drink or soft drink or something like that that you can just sip on during the presentation. My name is Ken Annandale, and Penny Jones and I started INTRA some 12 years ago with the primary objective of assisting people to set up their own health and safety training departments and or health and safety training companies. I've been in the health and safety world for many, many, many years. You can see by the color of my beard. I previously was in law enforcement, and then I went into security, and from security I went to safety, and after safety I joined NOSA and worked for them for a couple of years. Then I started a health and safety training company called INTRA-Train, and INTRA-Train was just that. It was a training company, and having run that for about 7 years, I realized that the difficulty sometimes being sort of torn between sales, marketing, advertising, course development, delivery of courses, all of that type of stuff, customer relations, all of that type of stuff. And those days, there was nothing digital that we could use to actually assist us. So it was all done very manually. And then a couple of years ago, 12 years ago, Penny and I realized that what we want to do is we want to make those services, as far as possible, make them available to other trainers so that they don't have to spend hours and hours and hours in meetings and workshops and seminars and online researching and stuff like that. And that's been the thrust of what we're going to be talking about today. Our organization as such is a research and development organization, and we then support trainers, as I mentioned. I'm going to be doing a PowerPoint, and I'm going to record it. As you know, you can see that the recording is on the go at the moment. The idea is that this evening, you'll be able to share that with your partner, with your accountant, with your attorney. You'll be able to show it to them. You can show it to the people at QCTO and SETA and SACWA and NQF with my blessing. Absolutely take it and share it with them. Because then it's a matter of that the more people hear what we have to say, hopefully the more people will take it seriously, because it's quite a serious aspect is that what we're going through in South Africa at the moment. Okay, so having said that, Penny is not going to be joining us. She actually had to pop out quickly, but I've got Natalie on in the background there. She is our marketing manager. She's also my daughter. When you see her name, you'll see it's the same. So Natalie, I'm going to ask you to quickly introduce yourself, and then I'm going to get into the presentation.
Hi everyone, so I'm Natalie and I'm the CRM manager. I also handle a bit of the marketing side of things. So usually I'm your first point of contact on your journey to becoming a licensee. If there's any questions that you have initially or anything that I can help you admin related, if you want a prospectus or a catalog, I'm your go-to person. So my details will be shared within the presentation today, and you can get in touch with me either via email or via WhatsApp. Thanks for being here and hope you enjoy the presentation.
Great, Nats, thank you so much. Okay, with that, I'm going to go straight into the PowerPoint. Just need to ask, can you confirm, can you see that, Natalie?
Yes, I can.
Right. Okay, so the invitation went out, and Natalie sent it out. She's our marketing manager, and the invitation went out saying, what is the future of health and safety training in South Africa? And I'm sure many of you have been listening to the underground news of what is happening. There's facts and fiction and misinformation and disinformation and stuff like that around this whole SACWA SETA NQF thing. And there's so much information out there that is contradictory. So I'm going to hopefully just clarify some of these issues. And I'm going to start off by making this emphatic statement that legal compliance is the future. Not SACWA, not SETA, not NQF, not QCTO, not credit bearing. None of those overshadow legal compliance. However, we will be talking about all of those things and talk about where it fits into this entire spectrum. So Natalie's just going to quickly ask you, if you haven't registered yet, just to register again, or maybe Nat, you can just share with us some thoughts around the registration process.
Yeah, you should have all had to register via Zoom itself in order to get the link to enter. But if for some reason you didn't have to enter your details, then please just drop them in the chat box or WhatsApp them to me. Thanks so much.
Similarly, for those that are watching the video and weren't able to put anything into the chat box, please just WhatsApp your details to Natalie, and she will then put you onto our database. But more importantly, she'll send you a lot of information. This is going to be a jam-packed session, and we'd like to be able to provide that information to you in writing so you can actually take it, share it, and stuff like that. Okay, so enough with that. You can grab your camera, or at least your phone, take a photograph of that screen so you've got Natalie's work number, 082 499 6911. That's 082 499-6911, and you can then chat with her and request certain documents from her still while during the presentation itself. Now, it's important for me to say that I'm not a lawyer. I mentioned that I have a background in law enforcement, and I've been involved in law enforcement for many, many, many years, and I love it. And I mentioned that I've been involved in occupational health and safety, literally from the transition from the old Factories Act to the Machinery and Occupational Safety Act to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and now the Occupational Health and Safety Act Amendment Bill as it's starting to loom on the horizon. And we'll talk about that. But if you do need legal advice, you can either go to Saiosh, the South African Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, as a member and get free legal advice there. Or alternatively, we're well connected and we've got a number of people who are attorneys, and they'll be able to provide you with some very, very good and useful information. Okay, so having said that, now we know that there's two pieces of legislation in South Africa that are really predominant. One is the Mines Health and Safety Act, and the other one is the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And I'm sure every single person here has attended a workshop 1 day or 2 day or something like that. Some of you may have done occupational health and safety legislation or legal liability, and you know that there's this piece of criminal legislation. Criminal as in they can lock you up. They can fine you, they can lock you up, they can arrest you, they can take your fingerprints, they can literally march you off into a police cell and stick you down in the dungeon, if you like. And that's what we're going to be talking about, and talk about what the Occupational Health and Safety Act says. And we know quite specifically that people have been and are being prosecuted in terms of this Occupational Health and Safety Act and the regulations. I chaired the Saiosh conference in Cape Town last week on Friday, and we had a number of attorneys speaking there, and they were talking about the cases that are and have been recorded and gone through the process of court. Unfortunately, health and safety isn't terribly popular. So you don't see it unless it's a major incident that takes place, but you don't see people being prosecuted. But I am assured by people that were formerly prosecutors in the Department of Manpower Courts and the Department of Labor Courts and now Department of Employment and Labor, that people are being prosecuted. And there are people that have acquired the notorious criminal record as a result of that, with all its negative implications. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to just take one or two of these sections, just unpack it quickly. Don't want to get into it. We have a one-day session on the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and we can work through that if you'd like to join us on that at some other stage. But let's quickly talk about Section 8, the duties of the employer. And there it's clear, absolutely clear. I'm just going to point out to you that there are 3 steps that this section talks about it. Firstly, it says that the employer must establish what hazards are attached to the work performed. You understand that? The second step is the employer must establish what precautionary measures are to be taken. And then the third step is that the employer must provide information, instruction, training, and supervision. Now, if you haven't read that Section 8, have a look at it again. There are a couple of things that you need to take notice of. For one, they use the word hazards and not risks. Secondly, once you've identified the hazards, and that process we call popularly called HIRA, Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment. Secondly, you know what your hazards are or your risk profile is, and you do the whole evaluation assessment thing. Then you've got to write precautionary measures. Now, this is an employer's responsibility, or they will have somebody on their team that will write these precautionary measures. Now, have a look at step number 3. The assumption is that you'll take the list of hazards, you'll take the precautionary measures, and you will build it into, you'll include it in your information sessions, your instruction sessions, and your training sessions. If they are not built into those 3 sessions, whatever sessions you might host, let me just tell you that you are missing the point. The point is that that's what the training is supposed to be about. And now I'm going to just quickly make an admission. When I ran INTRA-Train, and I owned it a good couple of years ago, I would go onto premises and I would run a course. Let's say on Monday, I'd go Pick and Pay, and I'd do, let's say, the Health and Safety Rep course. On Tuesday, I'd go to Premier Milling, and I would run exactly the same course. On Wednesday, I would go to Protea Hotels and run exactly the same course. You see the problem? The problem is that that training that I was running those years was not risk or hazard specific, which means if there is a prosecution, they're going to ask that question. Did you make it risk specific? And with huge respect to my colleagues in the training world, many of us have broken the law, or in fact, then assist or collaborate with clients that they break the law. And our primary job is, as trainers, our job is to keep our employers out of court and the employees out of hospital. And that's the job. Your job is not law enforcement, but law implementation. Okay, so there are the 3 steps: hazard identification, precautionary measures, and information, instruction, and training. And the last question that I'll ask is, do you know what the difference is? Why is it that they use this inform, instruct, and train all over, around the world, in legislation? And what is the legal implications when it comes to those? All right, let's move on to the next point. So we're talking hazards, 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 hazards. And we ask the question, is the training hazard specific? And we can see that the legislation section 8 says it must be. Then it carries on and says we must inform, instruct, and train. Now, can you prove that you had information sessions? And you know that I think it's section 37 in the Act that it talks about proof of evidence. Have you got evidence? Can you prove it that you had information sessions? And how did you inform the people? But more about that in our training sessions when we run them. But it's a very interesting thing. Most people do not have records of information sessions or instruction sessions. And rarely can they, 3 or 4 years later, say that the person received training. No documentation. Okay, enough of that. So step 1 is identify the hazards. And that we commonly call HIRA, hazard identification and risk assessment. And here are a couple of topics that you might find interesting that could be relevant. Have a look at them. How many of those are relevant to you and your client, or you and your health and safety training department? Now, not all, of course, not all, but you could, if this is a checklist, you could tick them off and say, have we done training on HIRA? Have we done training on policies and procedures? Have we done training on communication? Have we done on health and safety committees, and health and safety reps, and incident and accident? Have we done inspections and auditors and planned job observation? And. But that's just the start. What about these? Have we done this training? Can you prove it? And that's what INTRA is all about. INTRA focuses on helping people comply with the legislation. Firstly, to understand the legislation, and then secondly, to comply. And then there's more. It's a lot. And I often talk to, and we've been doing this for a long time, we talk to people and they go, yeah, we do health and safety induction. And I go, well, that's just one of about 150 topics that you could maybe consider running for your employees. That's crazy. Okay, having said that, it is doable. And we then hear what we must do with that information. Section 13 talks about the duty to inform. And it says there quite clearly that the employer must, as far as reasonably practicable, cause every employee. Now, I want to stop there for a second. The word every means all. Almal, ieder en elk. Not some. Every employee is supposed to be made conversant with the hazards to their health and safety. So every single employee, let's say you've got 300 employees there, each one would have a slightly different risk profile or hazard profile. And then, remember we said identify the hazards, and then the precautionary measures. So if I were a prosecutor, I'd come along and I'd say, well, have you actually run a training session on the precautionary measures, taking the precautionary measures and integrating them or customizing them into the training? Okay, so now, hopefully you're a little bit challenged as a result of that, so let's move on. Now we also recognize that there are something like 22, 23 regulations in the Act, and more coming out. And if you look at them, you're going to find that in those regulations, it talks about inform, instruct, and train. Training, inform, instruct, and train. Over and over and over again. And here's a question that I ask you. How many of you have read all those regulations to see whether they apply for your organization or to your clients? I don't want to embarrass you, but it's true to say that unless you have a vested interest in legislation and doing regulatory training or mandatory training, a lot of people miss these. For instance, there's a regulation called the Ergonomics regulation. Have you read it? Do you do it? We'll touch on that just now. Then there is a very interesting regulation. Most people don't even know it exists. It's the health and safety of children at work. Now, it's not necessary for you to study it, You need to be aware of it. When I was in police college, I had an instructor, and he said to me, you don't have to know the law. You need to know where to find the law. So you have a general understanding of what the law says. And then when you need it, you go to the library and you take it off the shelf those days. Nowadays, it's wonderful because we've got digital devices and you can put the legislation onto your cell phone or your iPad or your laptop. It's brilliant. I love it. So this morning I was doing some preparation and it was great. I just downloaded the piece of legislation, went through it, knew what I was looking for, and then I was able to complete this presentation. Okay, so now, did you know, for instance, that there's a noise-induced hearing loss regulation, and there is a draft noise-induced hearing loss regulation? And once again, have you read them? Have you studied them? And how it affects your organization? Because within those regulations, you're going to see it talks about inform, instruct, and train. And it also uses other words as well, words like educate and promote and things of that nature. But more about that at a later stage. Okay, so those are two regulations, ergonomics and noise-induced hearing loss, which we'll touch on. And then, of course, have a look that there are 3 draft regulations there: lead, physical agents, and, of course, noise-induced hearing loss. So from that point onwards, we go, wow, there's a lot of training that needs to take place, and we need to be aware of it. So I often hear people saying, yeah, but our training is accredited. Well, what does that mean? And I mean that respectfully. What does it mean? Does it mean anything if it's accredited? In most instances, the answer is a resounding no. It doesn't mean anything. You could stand in court and say, we attended an accredited or presented an accredited course, and it's almost a matter of going, let me say this humorously, but whoopie-doo, so what? Now, with that in mind, I'm not saying don't use accredited training or don't do accredited training. On the contrary, that's one of the things that you definitely want to do to make sure that you've covered all your bases. Okay, so having said that, look at this ergonomics regulation. It too says, like Section 13, all employees, they must attend training prior to placement, and the employer must conduct refresher training. Now, it carries on. There are a couple of other elements over there which we need to talk about at a later stage, not now. But do you know that all this training is supposed to be discussed with your health and safety reps and your health and safety committee? All of it. And in some instances, they have to agree to the training that needs to take place. Now, I really am getting picky when it comes to that type of stuff. But imagine this, that an incident's taken place, a prosecution is underway, there's an inquiry, the chief inspector has sent somebody down to the factory or wherever you happen to be, and they ask this question: did the committee agree to this training, to the training provider, to the training content, to the training methodology? Did they agree to the practicals, the exercises, the demonstrations? Did the committee agree? And if not, now you can hear the ex-policeman in me coming out, but this is all serious stuff. So what do we do? Well, what we do is we focus on compliance. Compliance, 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 compliance. Now, with the ergonomics regulation, it's important to know this, that regulation came out just as COVID came out. And I have asked numerous people, how many of you have actually attended an ergonomics workshop or have, for your client, run an ergonomics workshop? Then I had somebody a while ago say to me, yeah, but it has to be accredited. And I go, it can't be accredited. There's no unit standard. There's never a unit standard for ergonomics. There is one for ergonomics risk assessors. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, then, so how can the training be accredited? Then we know that there's this transition from SETA to SACWA, which we'll touch on. And we also see in that process that curriculum is are being written by the QCTO. And Penny and I have been involved in that process to a degree. But there's no curriculum that's been written for ergonomics. So what do? Well, we do the obvious. We do legal compliance training. Okay, now let's just quickly move on to the next one over there and talk about the noise-induced hearing loss regulation. There it talks about compliance training. And once again, all. Do you know that there's 16 million people in South Africa that are employed in some or other manner or means? Now, not all of them are employed in companies or for the government. Many of them are self-employed, but there's millions upon millions of people that need occupational health and safety training. Millions. And once again, look at those words: all, prior, refresher, competent, and keep a record. Now, I am going to come back to this word called competent. So bear with me on that one. The question is, what does the law say about compliance and competency and approval? And can you put your finger on it? And do you know the difference between accreditation and verification and certification and registration? Because you know what we've been doing, unfortunately, we collectively, we've been pursuing the wrong stuff from a legal compliance point of view in many instances. Not all the time, and well done for those that are actually making the effort. But there's a huge difference when it comes to accreditation and approval. Accreditation is by SETA and QCTO, those guys. Approval is by the Department of Employment and Labor. And I was chatting to a gentleman just a couple of minutes ago, and he was saying that he wants to run a first aid course, and the inspectorate are asking him for his CI number. Now, you need to know that stuff. You need to know how to get it and the importance of it. Okay, so having said that, I want to move on and just quickly talk about this thing called competency. It's a term that is thrown about. It's almost like SAQA has claimed this word. But I go, hang on. That's an English word. That's not a SAQA word. They can't claim it. And we see competency coming up in the legislation, in the General Safety Regulation 3 first aid training. Talk about a certificate of competency. Then we hear and see in various regulations where it talks about the competent person. Then we also know now more recently in the hazardous biological agents regulation that a competent person is somebody who's registered with the Health Professional Council or with the South African Occupational Health and Nurses Association. And we know that there is a registered regulation called the Certificate of Competency. And that's just a couple of examples. So if you had to be asked, is the person competent? I would go, sure. Which competency do you want? Pick one. And if they can't put their finger on it, boy, then we're in trouble because there's different competencies or different things. Okay, so where do we see it? Well, we find them in the regulations. And I mentioned that there's about 22 regulations that currently exist. And these are some of the regulations where it is clear and they talk about competency. Just have a look at them and see how many of them apply to you. Not all, clearly, but some, yes. And as you look at that lot, please note that the drafts aren't on that. The physical agents one and the lead, not on there yet. Okay, so having said that, and then the noise-induced hearing loss. So there's so much more that I can share with you right now, but don't have the time. But this is when the Jaws theme music comes up, that music that goes, do-dum, do-dum, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-dum. You all know that one. And those of you that are familiar with the legislation will know it's self-regulatory and it is criminal legislation. Criminal meaning, yeah, you can get prosecuted. You, your employees, the employee themselves, the employer, the contractors, the subcontractors can be prosecuted, as has happened in many instances. But then there's another threat. The threat isn't just to be prosecuted in terms of the criminal legislation, but also to be sued. And it is many employees are represented by excellent attorneys in South Africa who ensure that they get paid out a couple of million. Wow. All right. But hang on, there's more. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. I don't like using the legislation to scare people. I believe education and information is the way we go. If we can inform people so that they can actually do what is right, that is great. Now, those of you that attended the workshops that I ran some time ago on the amendment bill, and if you haven't attended them, just keep your eye to your laptop. We're going to be sending out more invitations, and we're going to be discussing the Occupational Health and Safety Amendment Bill sometime in 2024. And have a look at what they've done to the fines. Section 8, the employer must identify the hazards, determine the precautionary measures, and provide information, instruction, and training. That is 5 million rand per offense. Not 5 billion rand collectively or total, per offense. That's what they're proposing. So we better get our act together as far as health and safety training is concerned. Then section 13, I've just excluded or extracted those two. Section 30 is that duty to inform. So let's say you've got 300 employees, you don't train them. That's 200,000 times 30,000, 30 people. Getting confused with 300 people. Let me start again. So section 13 times the amount of employees that you did not provide information, instruction, and training times 200,000 rand or 2 years imprisonment. Now, if that doesn't wake the average employer up, then not much will. Now, has that legislation been passed? No. We are told it could, right now, could be on the president's table. We don't know. So on Friday at the Saiosh conference in Cape Town, Natalie was there with me. The Inspector General from the Department of Employment and Labour was there with the Chief Inspector, and her name is Millie Reuters. And they spoke about this. They spoke about this regulation that's going to come, or this amendment that's going to come out. And then there was another attorney by the name of Kate Collier who spoke about it. And then there was another attorney by the name of Ernst van Biljon. And those people are directly involved in the prosecutorial processes, defense or prosecution of employees or employers. And they all spoke as if this thing is going to happen, and it's going to happen around the corner. So once again, I'm suggesting that we all just take note of this and get our act together so that we can either provide the appropriate training for our employers or our clients, and or if we're actually employees within organizations, that you can provide that information. So it's a little bit of a scary picture over there. Now, this bill has not been promulgated yet. Please take note, it's not there yet. Okay, so what are our options? Well, on the one hand, we do what the Department of Employment and Labour says, because they are the legislators. And we know that in South Africa, we operate by the rule of law. And if the law says it, do it. Now, I remember the chief inspector, the former chief inspector, a man by the name of Mr. Thibaut Zana. And Thibaut said to me the other day, he said, if it's not in the law, don't do it. Unless it just makes sense. It's best practice. You don't have to do it if it's not in the law. That's such an interesting statement. And I chatted to him, and I'm not dropping names here, but I'm hoping that he will actually come and lecture for us a couple of times. I'm sitting with his fee structure for his services on my clipboard right next to me. And if you'd like to come along to these sessions, we will have to charge for it because he does charge a fee for it. But that you get to know the Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations as a layperson. One of the questions that I asked at the conference on Friday was this: how many of you have attended anything more than a 2-day workshop on the Occupational Health and Safety Act? And how is it that people that have attended a 1 or 2-day workshop are now lecturing as if they were lawyers in the workplace, running legal liability courses? And I go, really? Okay, so that's interesting. And what could happen in terms of the Consumer Protection Act if your information that you're providing to them is not up to standard? So bear that in mind. Okay. Then, of course, on the other hand, we know about the Department of Education. And we know about SACWA, SETA, NQF, and all these other organizations. Now, on the left-hand side, there are criminal penalties, and you could get into trouble, as I mentioned. Okay. On the right-hand side, if you do not do what SACWA says, so what? Unless it's regulatory. I'll come back to that. And we talk a lot about that in our workshops. If it is regulatory, then you've got to do what it suggests, because there's a supposition that that is now legislative. Okay, so without getting too much into that, let's just move on. You probably also heard, and there was a lot of stink in the marketplace and on social media and backwards and forwards at conferences and workshops and things of that nature, about what they did back in 2023, when they said that all the unit standards will expire. And then, of course, there was this huge outcry. And they then extended them to 2024. And now, because of the outcry, it's been extended to 2026. Now, I just want to mention this for what it's worth. That decision to go ahead and make this change from SETA to QCTO has cost this country countless millions of rands and hundreds of thousands of man hours, with people like yourself running around trying to find out what is going on. And it has been a really, really poor decision from a governmental point of view. It really has. And I speak out about it. Okay, so having said that. So let's just quickly run through it. So previously, you'd go to SETA, you'd get your accreditation from them. But now, as a result of this decision to move to QCTO, you cannot get accreditation from SETA anymore. If you are accredited with SETA, thank goodness, that accreditation will last until 2026 unless they extend it again. Now, for a while, you couldn't do anything with it, but at least they listened to us. So if you don't have accreditation with SETA, it's really sad to say, but you can't get it. If you have got accreditation, it's still valid, you can use it. And if your accreditation is about to expire, like INTRA's accreditation, we can't renew it. And that's where we stand at the moment with that. Then, of course, with the unit standards, and if you know, there was about 11,000 unit standards. They all expired. Now the various SETAs are trying to extend them again. And I think in many instances, they've done a great job, thankfully. But there will be no new unit standards. So why do I say that? Because all of a sudden we say, I said to you that the ergonomics regulation, there's no unit standard. Now, they're not going to write one. So what they're going to do is they're going to wait for the QCTO. So if you're not accredited or you want to become accredited by the QCTO, it's a slightly different arrangement. And as we know with the QCTO, you can only get accreditation for QCTO published codes and curricula. You can't get accreditation for unit standards. That's important. And if there are no published curricula that are relevant, tough. What do? Legal compliance training. Back to that. Okay. Now they did, towards the end of last year, they published 3 curricula or codes, as they call them, specifically in the skills program range for first aid. And they brought them out. They were called basic, intermediate, and advanced. And some of you may have already acquired your accreditation for that. However, as a result of the processes, the Health Professional Council stepped up and objected to those 3 curricula. So we've heard from the QCTO now that if you got accreditation for those 3, you now have to reapply for accreditation once they have revised those 3. Again, huge amount of time, effort, energy, money that's going to be spent getting reaccreditation. Now, if you happen to be accredited in terms of SETA and you are using those other unit standards, thankfully, you can still use those. Great. That's great news. Okay. Then what are they doing for the future? Well, so far, Penny and I have sat on a committee and we have developed or been part of a process of developing 12 new health and welfare SETA curricula. And I'll show them to you in a moment. But we have no idea when they're coming out. We heard that they were going to come out in May of this year. And then last month, I heard that they're going to come out in September of this year. And we recently received a communication saying, please comment on the documentation. And if we have to wait for commentary and then publication and then the development of the training material, we're talking about probably March next year that you can actually start running or getting accreditation from QCTO. It's a nightmare. Now, I'm saying that, but there is a solution. The solution is legal compliance training. Go back to the law. If the law says do it, do it. And don't be swayed if somebody says it has to be accredited, unless the law says it must be accredited. Okay. Now, we do know that the other SETAs are also working on relevant occupational health and safety curricula, such as firefighting, such as working at heights and things of that nature. And we're waiting, ear to the ground, we're waiting to hear what's happening. What are they going to do? And the moment we hear, we will notify our client base. Now, if you happen to be accredited and you want to find out if your unit standards have been extended, please go onto that website. You can see it at the bottom there, the URL. Just pop onto, take a photograph of that screen, go onto the SACWA website, and you can do a search. And let me just quickly mention, I was talking about first aid. The basic first aid is unit standard number 119567. You can put it in, you can search, you can see, yes, it's been extended. Hallelujah. We've got that. That means that you can run that course, but you cannot, unfortunately, bad news. Those of you that are not accredited with SETA cannot get it anymore. That's the way it is, unless they change their minds again. Okay, so here are some of the QCTO codes, and you'll see the numbers on the left-hand side column, and you'll see the 3 first aid ones there. And then you'll see that there's about 12 health and welfare SETA and QCTO skills programs with it. They've created the outline. They still haven't done the curriculum. Now, how does that frustrate us as health and safety trainers? It does enormously. I don't do health and safety training as such anymore, but this is something that concerns us enormously because remember all those topics that I showed you? The employer must identify the hazards, and I showed you 3 pages of topics. Now, when are they going to write those curricula? We have no idea. In any case, if you look at the notional hours on the right-hand side, those notional hours, the first couple of them are like a year-long course. And that's not the kind of training that I would have previously been involved in. I don't run a college or didn't run a college. I used to do 1, 2, and 3 day short course, micro courses, I used to call them. Okay, more about that later. Alrighty. So this is what they have actually published so far. I said there were 12. They've got 2 health and safety rep programs, low risk and high risk. Then they've got what they call the essential OHS compliance insurer. And I asked the gentleman that was actually running and these work groups, I said, what is an insurer? There's no such word in the English language. So in other words, QCTO has made up a word, or somebody made up this word, insurer. And now they've got 3 of them, compliance insurer. What does that mean? I thought that's a health and safety rep. But this is not a health and safety rep because we've got 2 already. Maybe it's a supervisor, maybe it's a manager, maybe it's a chief executive officer, maybe it's, I don't know. And then there is a risk assessor, and there's 2 of them, an assessor and a specialist. You're going, hang on, isn't there duplication over here? And then the last category over there is emergency preparedness. So in other words, if you look at that list that I was talking about, there's a lot of training where we need curriculum written, and they're focusing on some interesting but not all that relevant stuff. Some of it's relevant, but not all that relevant. What about these? When are we ever going to see the curriculum for this? For these? Irrespective of which SETA it comes from. I scratch my head. I really, so if it took us this long, it took 17 months to publish the first aid curricula. 17 months. And now, from September last year to now, it's almost September again, they still haven't fixed it. So I'm not trying to be negative. In fact, I was saying to Natalie this morning, I don't want to be negative, but the truth of the matter is, how do you prove compliance? You can't stand in a court of law and go, QCTO has this uncertain future for us. So the future is, in my opinion, in our hands. Legal compliance training. And you as the trainer, you're going to have to you're going to have to mind the gap. You're going to have to work between what is available to you, if it's valid, currently with SETA, and of course with QCTO, as and when QCTO publish their curriculum. And the main thing that you're going to do, as per my recommendation, is focus on what the law says. Legal compliance training is the future. Now, it's a foreseeable future. It might be the future for 6 months or 12 months or 12 years. We don't know. But what we're saying is that it's still legislated that we have to do this training for our employers or our employees. Okay, so what has INTRA done? INTRA has developed training material, not specifically with those topics in mind for accreditation purposes, but just generally. We've got a number of training programs which are already up and running, but they're not unit standard aligned and they are not QCTO aligned. These are generic health and safety training programs which you can either acquire from us, all of them, or you can acquire the ones that you need. They've been used extensively throughout South Africa and beyond the borders of South Africa as well. Okay, so there we go. There's a couple of programs that I'm sure that you could run. There's more. And these are programs that are generic. Shall we call them, for a training provider, this is the low-hanging fruit. This is the kind of stuff that every single employer may or may not need, and the probabilities that they would need. And if you remember what I said early on, the employer must identify the hazards. So if we look at noise, it says exactly the same thing. Section 304 or Regulation 304 says identify the hazards. And if the hazards exist, then provide information, instruction, and training. And that goes through all of the regulations as well. Okay, so let's quickly talk about occupational health and safety awareness. And we'll call that the inductor. We've got a program, it's video-based, got facilitator guides and learner guides and workbooks and PowerPoints and things of that nature. And you can then customize this training material so that you can meet the legal requirement as required by the law. You say, where does it require by the law? Section 13. Section 13 says you must inform your employees of the dangers, hazards, and risks. Remember that one. Okay, so once again, it brings me back to this topic, and I'm passionate about it, is that you can become a legal compliance training provider where you focus your attention around legal compliance, legal compliance, legal compliance. And with that in mind, we put together a business model, and I'm going to just quickly go through it. The document on the right-hand side there is our prospectus. Natalie will send it to you if you haven't got it yet. And this is the business model. So if you look at all those elements over there, the ones in orange or yellow, gold, those are part of our prime license, and the ones that are in white are not part of the prime license. Hope that makes sense to you. So let's quickly go through. We've got a licensed business model. It's all explained in that prospectus. We have two types of licenses. There's the prime license, and then there is the starter license. The starter license comprises of these elements. I'm going to ask Natalie to just quickly read through them while I take a sip of water.
So the starter license has 6 intro training materials, and then as well as the e-learning programs that match those training materials. It includes the 2-day online train the intro trainer, and you have the ability to reproduce the learner manuals, but not the facilitator material. And you're able to customize the material with your logo, case studies, photos, etc. You're welcome to co-brand with us if you'd like. And you have the option to also resell the e-learning courses to earn 50% profit share. And there's no subscription fee attached to this package.
Great. Then if you start with that, as the name implies, you can then move on to the prime license as well. That's
Yes, correct. So with the prime license, that includes everything that was mentioned in the starter license, as well as all the training material and updates that are outlined within the prospectus document. You also get the corporate facilitator material copyright. There's the 2-day online train the intro trainer, e-learning courses for 2 people that get access to 15 courses. And on completion of all the e-learning courses, they'll receive a HASMAN certificate. You get access to all of our Zoom sessions and workshops. There's our Intra-SAFE kit and the QCTO accreditation DIY workshops. And then we're able to stagger the upfront fee upon arrangement. So if you do need a payment plan, there is a 5% admin fee, but we're happy to split that over 3 months if that will help you. And the prime package does include the monthly subscription fee for ongoing support.
Thanks, Natalie. Now, those of you that are listening or watching, I'm sure that you have questions. The questions are starting to build up. So the first thing that I'll mention to you is, if you want us to do this presentation for your management team, just speak to Natalie and she'll set it up with me. And I'll do this just for your management team. That's going to be a real pleasure. No problem at all. Or as I do a lot during the course of a week, questions and answers with individuals. So you can see it's a fairly detailed program or processes to get you up and running and to get you your startup department or your startup business up and running as quickly as possible, as cost effectively as possible. We'll talk about costs in a moment, and that's Natalie's speciality. She can quickly talk through the various costs there.
So the starter license comes in at 15.5 ex VAT. And the prime license comes in at 49,500 ex VAT. Corporate license, we like to have a separate call with you just to discuss what your needs are, how big your corporation is, etc. And then based on that, we're able to give you a better idea in terms of what the upfront fee will cost. Monthly subscription fee on the prime package and the corporate is 1,500 ex VAT, and that's with a minimum of a 5-year license. And we also have the option of you able to purchase the intellectual property. So if you would like to set up your own e-learning platform, you can purchase the IP from us, and you can just request those details from me directly. We have a price for non-licensees and we have a price for our licensees.
Great. Okay. Natalie, thank you so much. You'll notice on the right-hand side, as it talks about MobiCred and Lululend, we obviously assist you where possible via finance houses to pay for that upfront fee if you wish. But chat to Natalie about it, and obviously she's got a couple of other recommendations that should make for you. All right. Now, I'm going to run through the rest of this as quickly as possible. So imagine this, that you've bought a business. It's not a franchise, but it's similar to a franchise, but you own it. You brand it according to your own specific needs. Then What we'll do is we'll work with you as if you're a startup business. And we've got orientation sessions such as the one that's coming up on Saturday the 30th or 31st. It's about a day long. It's about 6 hours all told, and it is jam-packed with information. That orientation session also goes hand in hand with an onboarding that Penny does. And these sessions are mainly for those people that want to run their own training companies. Now, if you happen to be a corporate, I noticed there are 1 or 2 corporates that are attending today. It might not be necessary that you actually go through this, but we would welcome you to attend. The next one, of course, is the Train the Trainer, and it's a Train the Licensee Trainer kind of program. And it's a 2-day program. It goes down very, very well. And we break away from all the traditional Train the Trainer type stuff, but we talk about finance and admin and legal. We talk about sales and marketing. We talk about promotions. We talk about things of that nature. And it is really, and I'm saying this, it's my past 30, 35 years worth of experience in the health and safety training game, and being able to generate or create a company which has sustained myself and a number of people for a long time. So very, very useful. Then Natalie's got a contribution which she'll talk about in a moment. And this is predominantly for those of you that are setting up your training department. Nats?
Yeah, so the online marketing setup is included in the Prime license only. And that includes just a basic setup of getting you present on a couple of platforms that I feel are very important, as well as I include some basics for your digital marketing strategy and some important tools that you're able to utilize to get going. So there's a setup that I do, and then there's a video that you'll receive as well that will just help you get going with all of this. And you're also able to use me for any consultation or queries that you might have as you get going with your marketing journey.
That's about 5 hours, is that right, Nats?
No, we changed that, but so it's a bit different. It's about 3 hours plus the video, which is about an hour. So approximately.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I understand that. And then those of you that are saying, why Natalie? She's got a media degree from UCT. She's worked for various advertising agencies in the social media space. So she's going to give you some really good advice and guidance. And she's done this literally for dozens of other licensees. Okay, Natalie, thank you so much. Let's go on to the next point over here. Natalie mentioned that we have an e-learning platform, and that e-learning platform currently comprises of 15 e-learning programs that are up and running. And if you've come in with a Prime license, you can send any 2 people on those programs as part of your orientation. But then there's also a reseller opportunity, which we'll talk to you more about then. Then, of course, there's all the compliance training material that I listed previously, which we'll talk about, and we'll show you how to unpack it and how to customize it and how to present it where appropriate. We've got an annexure called Annexure D, and it lists all the programs that we've got there. Now, we're adding 3 more that we're currently developing. We've got somebody that's working with us, happens to be in Ireland, and we'll be launching the Working in Confined Spaces program shortly. Then there is a stacking and storage program, and then there is a tools, power and hand tools workshop that we're going to be adding to our legal compliance training. Now, this means that you can issue certificates, attendance, participation, compliance, whatever you want to call them, but not competency. Remember, competency is that word that we see comes up with SAQA, and we don't want to confuse the issue over here. But you're able to, and we'll provide you with a template so that you can issue your own certificates as well, with your logo, your website, your details on it. Okay, then we move on, and we have a look at all the training material that we've currently got that was SAQA unit standard aligned. And there were about 40 of them there. And of course, we've got 3 QCTO programs that you can acquire as well. All of this comes as part of the license fee. So if you're a Prime licensee, you're going to receive over 50 programs together with something like 17 current legal compliance programs that we've got. So it really does equip you to get up and running quickly. If you were to develop this training material, which you can do, and we assist people to develop, it is just incredibly time consuming, as you would appreciate. Okay, now, if you're going to go into business and you want to run training programs, the question is, do I do accredited training or do I do compliance training? And accredited training, you'll notice over there, has numerous interventions, lots of people involved, and they all want to be paid. So if you're running accredited programs, please make sure that you cost your training programs appropriately. I hear often where people run accredited programs, they cut the prices and they cut their own throats. 2-3 months later, they're out of business. You've got to cost these things correctly. So we're saying that in the initial stages, focus on compliance. You'll see it's a lot cheaper, a lot fewer people. You can charge your client a reasonable price. And of course, at the same time, you can deliver excellence by just going, what's the 7 points over there? Much, much easier. Now, as I come to the end of the presentation, I just want to say to you that there's so much more that I can share with you. I said to you that when the QCTO is ready and they've published the curricula, then you can apply, and you should apply for accreditation, because there are certain other benefits to employers that they would have in mind, such as BEE points. Now, at the moment, regulatory training does not garner BEE points. Maybe they want skills levy rebates. That's something that you should consider as well. But if there's no unit standard and there is no curriculum that's been written, a QCTO curriculum, those things don't work at this stage completely. However, watch this space. There is more information that I can share with you as to how employers can get rebates without using an accredited company. Very important point there. Okay, then you decide, I want to go for accreditation. So what we'll provide to you is a very, very comprehensive Accredi kit. And Penny developed the Accredi kit some time ago with that specific intention in mind. She then runs a workshop, and the workshop runs over a period of about 5-6 days, 5-6 2-hour session days. So let me just clarify that. And the accreditation workshop prepares you for accreditation. Now, why you? I'll tell you why. In the past, we used to use agents and consultants. And as a result of them having a huge pile of files and dockets on their desk, they would never get through them. There were people that were waiting for a year or two for their accreditation. We really believe that the QCTO recently want you to do your own accreditation. They actually say so in the documentation. They prefer not to work with consultants, and they prefer not to work with agents. Now, sometimes they can't stop you from doing it, but sometimes it's way better if you and your admin staff just do it yourself. And here's a very good reason why. When you apply for your accreditation with the QCTO, you can only get 6 programs accredited. And in the health and safety game, we often run a lot more than 6 programs. If you want more than 6, you have to submit a completely brand new accreditation application. And every single time you do that, if you hand it to an agent or a consultant, it will take you forever. Now, I'm not being negative there because the QCTO is so snowed under at the moment. Okay, so Penny will teach you what to do, what documents to fill in, and she's got a favorite saying, you've got to get your ducks in a row. And in fact, her saying is, get your docs in a row. Okay, then what do? We've now got you up and running. You're starting to get your documentation in place. You've got your workshops running. You've customized the training material. We'll show you how to do that in our orientation sessions. Now, train the trainer. And you're now in a position where you can then start growing your company organically. You can scale your business. You can go Cape Town, Durban, Joburg, East London. You can go anywhere in Africa. We have licensees that range literally from Dubai to Durbanville. And you can then work with these people. Now your company is starting to grow. We regularly host workshops. I told you about the amendment bill workshops that we're going to start running again, and we'll invite you to that. We'll be running workshops with the former chief inspector and attorneys and advocates so that you can hear what it is that they have to say and understand this stuff better. And that's webinars. We've also got a YouTube channel, and there's 2 portions. One is the private portion, the other portion is the public portion. So you can go onto it now. If you just take a photograph of that URL at the top there and pop onto it and just see what's there. I mentioned ergonomics training. The person who helped co-write, or in fact co-develop that training program, is one of South Africa's leading ergonomists. And we have a Zoominar that we recorded as an orientation process that you can go and watch. Then we've got food safety, we've got environmental awareness, programs like that, that you can watch the developer of the program doing an orientation of the training material. Now, having said that, there's so much more. Then, of course, there are the networking opportunities. I mentioned Durban to Dubai. If you are already operating in Africa, great. You can take that training material and you can customize it and talk to us about translating it into a relevant language. So we have licensees that operate in Angola and Mozambique. We have licensees that operate in the DRC where they speak French. And we would then support you as far as possible to actually present that training in those countries. Okay, so with that in mind, you can see that it's kind of like some trainers are between a rock and a hard place. If you're an aspirant and you want to set up your business, I'm saying to you, do what is reasonable. If you're an employer and you have to train your employees, do what is reasonable. And you're familiar with that term called the reasonable person or the reasonable man, diligence pater familias. It says, by way of implication, you do what is reasonable. So imagine this. If you say, I can't do training because I can't get accreditation, that's not right. You have a constitutional right to do training. You can do it. I've got a publication on that as well. What would a reasonable person do? A reasonable person would then say, let me weigh up my options. And on the one hand, we comply with the law. And on the other hand, we work through this QCTO thing over the next 12 to 18 months so we can run training programs. I'm saying right now, tomorrow, next day, next week, next month, do legal compliance training. And then we will guide you as things emerge so that you can get your act together as far as the QCTO and SACWA is concerned. So what would the reasonable man do? The reasonable man or reasonable person would focus on legal compliance training. I know at this stage, I'm just looking at my phone here, got 3 minutes to go. So at this stage, I'm just going to ask Natalie to do a quick wrap up for me. And you probably heard I went at high speed to get the entire thing done and recorded. Then I'm going to stop the recording and we're going to just open the microphones and you can ask whatever questions you wish or set up appointments with Natalie. Natalie, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So I've dropped the link to our form on our website so that you can request the prospectus or quote there and just drop your details. You'll receive an automated mailer with the prospectus document. If you would like us to send you a quote for what we mentioned today, then please do just pop me a WhatsApp and we can get that through to you soonest. Otherwise, we'll share this recording with you at either later today or tomorrow first thing as soon as we have it. So you'll have this in your WhatsApp or your inbox soon. Thanks so much.
Great, Natalie, thank you. Let's just go back to somewhere here is the visual. I see Anna-Marie's got her hand up. Anna-Marie, would you like to ask your question?
Good afternoon, Ken. QCTO is in they are going down a very murky road at the moment. They are more focused on the training accreditation that must be done by a Saiosh accredited person. So I just looked at this and I thought to myself, oh my word. So they're focusing on the training venue and not on training itself now. And we, the OHSA Act is like running hand in hand with our SASRIA Act. So this is very concerning for us. And we are also going the legal compliance route because that is the only way out.
Yeah. In fact, Anna-Marie, thank you so much. And it's great to hear you again and nice to hear from you again. So those of you that are confused, verification is from Saiosh. Registration is with the Department of Employment and Labor. Registration is also, approval is with the Department of Employment and Labor. Accreditation is with SACWA. And these are things that we unpack and discuss in our orientation sessions. So our Train the Trainer program, you got the dates over there. We'd love to have you there as a licensee, come on board, and we'll explain all of these things through with you and to you. And it is really at the stage now where we're saying most people should really consider going with the legal compliance stuff. And then once you know what's going on with QCTO, we'll go with them. But Penny and I will help you. We'll guide you. We've got a couple of really, really good consultants that work with us or associates that work with us. So thanks, Anna-Marie. Appreciate that. Okay, any other questions? Natalie, have you got any questions from your side?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop the recording because it's on the hour. I love being as prompt as possible. Need to find the button so I can switch it off. And then what we'll do is we'll just open up for questions. So to those of you that have been watching the video, not in the live presentation, thank you for joining us. It's been really good. We look forward to helping you, giving you guidance. And you can just chat to Natalie about setting up a one-on-one meeting with myself and Natalie and Penny or whoever. Don't go away. I'm just going to stop the recording and then we'll open the microphones. Thanks very much then. Bye for now.